where we're heading is really making sure that we have a range of housing options. So we don't talk about doing affordable housing development. I mean, affordable to whom?
Right.
We just talk about making sure that in our region we have a range of housing options. The other big thing about where we are in the Midcoast is basically if Bath Iron Works is at the northern end and L.L.Bean is at the southern end, you've got, I think it's a 12-mile corridor with only 3 sides because the ocean is on essentially
Unless
on
you have a boat,
on the other side.
Or a life raft.
You've got Bath Iron Works, Brunswick Landing, Midcoast, now MaineHealth, Bowdoin College, and L.L.Bean all competing for a similar pool of workers that are living in a similar area that is already constricted by the ocean. And that's really challenging. We have been really having more regional conversations, which has been great.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot, of Pouliot Real Estate. Each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here.
So today on Housing Matters, I'm thrilled to have joining us Debora Keller, the Executive Director of Bath Housing. Debora's been with Bath Housing since January 2014. She's a community development leader in Maine with 30 years of experience in nonprofit management. She holds a master's degree from Tufts University in Policy and Planning and a bachelor's from Indiana University. She received the 2016 Stephen B. Morse Award from Maine Housing in recognition of the creation of Comfortably Home and was the 2010 recipient of the Joseph Chrysler Community Impact Award from Preble Street for her work developing the Florence House in Portland, which we've actually talked about previously on this show. Keller currently chairs the City of Bath's Housing Committee and sits on the board of the Maine Association of Public Housing Authority Directors. Deb previously worked at Avesta Housing and the Genesis Fund, a Maine-based community development financial institution providing loans to nonprofit organizations. Deb started her affordable housing career as a Vista volunteer. Interesting, where she created a security deposit loan program for low-income clients and a breakfast cafe for the homeless. That is wonderful. Deb, thank you for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I want to get started with your personal and professional journey. You have over 30 years of experience in nonprofit management and affordable housing, starting as a Vista and progressing through leadership roles at Genesis, Vesta Housing, and now at Bath. Can you share a bit about your journey and what drew you into community development and affordable housing in Maine?
I moved to Maine in 2000.
Okay.
On my 30th birthday, with no jobs.
You just outed yourself, Deb.
That's all right. No problem. We up and left Boston and wanted to move to Maine. We always called it a quality of life move. And within a few months, we found a house in Bath and kind of settled in Bath. And I always tell a long story, which I won't bore you with, about how I had written a paper in grad school about my perfect community, and I feel like Bath checked all the boxes of that perfect community. So very happily settled in Bath and then started the search for a job. And I was very fortunate to land a position at the Genesis Fund back when it was in the founder's home office in Bristol, and really did a lot of back office support there for the first couple of years, and then spent more time out in the state doing technical assistance with communities all around the state, talking about their housing challenges. After a few years, I was ready to sort of ramp up the work I was doing, and I was fortunate to be invited by Avesta to apply for a development position there. And so then I had a good 9-year run at Avesta Housing. I never considered myself a developer or and sort of shied away from that job description or calling myself a developer for a number of years.
Why?
I thought about more of the negative connotations, but going in and starting to do development for a nonprofit developer and in a way that we were so focused on how the housing was going to be part of a broader community development conversation was really pivotal for me. It sort of shaped my role of what we were doing. So So I had 9 years at Avesta in a variety of roles before jumping over to Bath Housing. But backing up a little bit, I got interested in housing in college. I went to a Big Ten school, and communities were really being torn apart by the housing needs of students who could go out and, 4 students, 5 students could rent a small house and pay 4 times what landlords were getting from families. And that's how I first learned about housing issues, was actually as a journalism major at Indiana University, having somebody come and talk to one of our classes about the housing issues. At that point, I wanted to get to know more and learn more about the issues, and started volunteering at a homeless shelter in the community and doing some work there. Got involved with Habitat and doing some Habitat spring break trips. And so when I finished college, I ended up as a VISTA volunteer, which many of you might not know was the precursor to AmeriCorps. And when Clinton took office, VISTA sort of got morphed in with the larger AmeriCorps program. But it's a domestic service program. And I spent a year in Iowa City, another Big Ten college town, and really got very involved in hands-on experience in program development, which was I've really fell in love with that kind of work. And so at every turn, whether it was as a college volunteer, as a VISTA volunteer, at Genesis, Avesta, and now at Bath Housing, it's really looking comprehensively at the community and looking across issue areas, looking at how we can be working together, collaborating to make communities better places, more livable, more functional. And housing is kind of one piece of that, where I've ended up spending most of my time, but it bridges a lot of other aspects of a community.
It's interesting that you mentioned during this journey what your view of a developer was and how it's changed. And I wonder if there are many other people out there who may share a similar view to what you had previously, that somehow development or developers are greedy people that just want to make as much money as they can and don't really care about social benefit. I mean, I'm not suggesting that was your view, but I'm kind of anecdotally sharing what I think a lot of people do think. And I wonder if that is from a place of just not understanding like how the process works, or being on the front lines like you ended up being. And to what degree that may abate itself if there's more development that's done by nonprofits like what you're doing with Bath Housing.
I mean, I think the onus is on us as developers to tell our stories, to talk about how we're doing the work, what we're doing, why we're doing it. And that's a big part of it. And I think ultimately it doesn't really matter if you're a for-profit or a nonprofit. And I'll come back to that. But, we as the development community really need to be talking about the broader aspects of the work we're doing. You're not just putting housing in a community. I mean, that housing connects people. Just last week, I was sharing survey work we do as we're building new buildings and moving people in. We're doing surveys of where do they come from, what were their housing challenges before, how does this new apartment solve their housing challenges, what are their connections to the community, and a series of other questions. How does their commute time change? And that, then we're able to take that information and share it with the community. And we have a list of 14 employers that now have staff members that have stable housing because of a building we just opened last June. So, again, for-profit or nonprofit, the work we're doing to build a range of housing options is it's phenomenal work, and we need to be telling that story.
Well, here we are today telling that story, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
You've been with Bath Housing since January 2014, so congratulations on your 12 years, for my quick math.
Yeah.
Leading initiatives like Comfortably Home and receiving recognition from Maine Housing and Preble Street, as we mentioned, for your work. What was it like stepping into Bath Housing? And maybe for those listening, not all housing authorities do development. In fact, I think most don't, right? Or
so
is there getting more now?
Yeah, I'd have to fact check myself, but I think there are somewhere 20, 21, 22 housing authorities in the state of Maine.
Okay.
And of those, I did do a recent count, and I think over half now, maybe 11 of those are actively doing real estate development.
Interesting.
The tide is changing, and we're definitely seeing more.
Is that just a Maine thing, or is that the case nationally?
I don't know. I can't
Okay.
answer that.
Yeah.
I can tell you a lot about Maine, but
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of that maybe. I would imagine that maybe some of that interest in having the housing authorities become developers is a function of the resources that are more available now on the low-income housing tax credit front. Do you think that that's the case? Because Maine put in place its own state-level low-income housing tax credit in 2019, and now there's actually a bill in the legislature to extend that because there's a sunset, I think, 2028 or 2030, something like that, that they want to just get rid of the sunset. But the way in which these housing tax credits are structured, there's almost no incentive for a developer who wants to hold the building long-term to do so for economic gain because of the way they set up the program, which is good because we have limited resources and you want to make sure it's going to get housing at a low rate. So I think that we're seeing housing authorities that are doing more projects because they ultimately end up running it with no need to really make an economic benefit on the other end, other than covering the costs so they provide a place for people to live. Do you think that that's the reason why more housing authorities are getting in the game, or is it just more like...
I think it might be a little bit broader than that.
Okay.
We've seen a leadership transition in a lot of housing authorities where you have new executive directors that have development experience, background like me, Mike Myatt at Bangor Housing. You have a recognition that housing authorities are really truly rooted in our communities and have a very strong sense of what's going on and what the needs are, and powerful reputations that can support getting a project done. And in a lot of communities, it can be challenging. But when you have deep roots and a lot of people know you and trust you and feel good about the work that you've been doing, it definitely facilitates that process. So I think leadership, I think the relationships and that core core commitment to that local area are two big pieces of it. And then the third is really just need and capacity. There's a sea change in the development world here, and we're seeing it more and more. You have developers, for-profit developers that aren't developing in Maine anymore. You have some that are growing. You've got, changes in terms of capacity. And the reality is, as a housing authority, we're really good at navigating complex federal programs and doing a lot of things that are necessary to pull together a variety of streams of funding to get these challenging projects built and then to operate them. We have just great property management companies. So I think those are a few of the reasons, and just finally just need, just the sheer need. And if you don't have a private developer that's active in your region, but you have a housing authority, it's just sort of by the nature of it. It's okay. Let's get into development. I mean, I didn't get into development at Bath lightly. We waited a good 10 years. Did a lot of other work before we said, okay, we're ready to take on some development projects.
That's great. Yeah, I think we don't have a lot of professional developers in Maine. I mean, I know that we don't have many who say, my job is I'm a developer. And we were actually talking about this earlier as it relates to the podcast and content and so forth, because we've had a lot of a lean toward development. But a lot of it is because we need more inventory, and we're finding that a lot of people, because there aren't many people who raise their hand and say, I'm a developer, just don't have any idea of what goes in. And it's further upstream from the crisis, But I think that we've found a lot of times that then when a developer who is a developer comes to the table and they see some of these programs, like, as you mentioned, they're complex, there's a lot of paperwork and everything, and they're like, I'm all set. I'm going to do a market rate project, which we need those too, but there's certainly a need for subsidized, or supported projects, because it's really, frankly, the only way to get the rent down to a level people can afford to pay. And it seems that, housing authorities are well suited to do that, either vis-a-vis actually being the developer or agreeing to some kind of management to take over the building once it's been developed by somebody that wants to just be on the developing side to be able to manage it and run it long term.
Yeah, I think there's been a recognition and evolving in the 25 years I've been in Maine of you can have different entities play different roles. And so you can have somebody on the development side, somebody on the services side, somebody on the property management side, and you can kind of mix and match in a way that works for a community or for a project.
So with 175 affordable apartments, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and Comfortably Home, Bath Housing serves a region with significant housing challenges. What do the current housing needs look like in Bath and in the surrounding areas, and how do you see these challenges evolving?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We just commissioned our third sort of housing data update. The reality is we did the first study when I first got there, the second study about 6 or 7 years ago, and this is the third. And intuitively, I think we knew what the needs were at every turn, and the data just sort of documents that, and we haven't found a lot of surprises. But, I mean, the reality is this many years later, we still have low vacancy in our region, in the Midcoast. We have basically the demands for and the need for housing hasn't eased at all, possibly even gotten worse. There continues to be a huge and growing mismatch between incomes and housing costs. And we still have housing quality issues. I would say to some extent those have maybe eased a little bit in the last, 12 to 15 years, but we still have apartments that have, we in Maine, as I think you've probably shared many times on this podcast, has the oldest housing stock in the nation.
Yeah.
If you look at the Midcoast region, our housing stock is even older than Maine's housing stock.
Yeah.
So, that comes with a whole set of issues. So those are kind of the three things that have been pretty constant. One of the most interesting shifts that I'm seeing happening in Bath is that Bath is no longer a low-income community. Mm-hmm. So Bath was always a blue-collar working shipbuilding community and was known to be a low-income community. Mm-hmm. If you look at the demographics, we are no longer that. We are a middle-income community now.
Is that because people wanted to be, like close to the river, not as expensive as maybe like a Brunswick or Portland, but...
Well, it's interesting. Our very first housing study that Frank O'Hara did, again, the first year I got to Bath Housing in 2014, maybe 2015, we put that out. Frank, in his executive summary, said, basically, Bath, get ready. This community is going to change. You've got the redevelopment of Brunswick Landing. Mm-hmm. That has taken place in this time stretch. You have a new high school, New Morse High School. The proximity that we have to Reed State Park and Popham Beach, two of the most glorious places in Maine. Mm-hmm. A beautiful historic downtown with a vibrant business community. Frank basically said it's just a matter of time before people discover Bath, and that's exactly what we've seen happen. People discovered Bath. And the reality is we're in a very commutable distance. It's one of the reasons I chose to live in Bath is you can commute. You could commute to Camden and Rockland. You can commute to Lewiston, Auburn. You can commute to Augusta. You can commute to Portland, all within, obviously Brunswick, but all within, a 40-minute, very drivable commute if you want to. Mm-hmm. And then the pandemic exacerbated everything. Mm-hmm. So we're not a low-income community anymore. There's a lot of appeal, a lot of attraction. So really, from our perspective, we've shifted to looking at a vision, really, that anybody who wants to live in our area has a reasonable opportunity to do so, regardless of income or anything else. And so where we're heading is really making sure that we have a range of housing options. So we don't talk about doing affordable housing development. I mean, affordable to whom?
Right.
We just talk about making sure that in our region we have a range of housing options. The other big thing about where we are in the Midcoast is basically if Bath Iron Works is at the northern end and L.L.Bean is at the southern end, you've got, I think it's a 12-mile corridor with only three sides because the ocean is on essentially on the other side.
Or a life raft.
You've got Bath Iron Works, Brunswick Landing, Midcoast, now MaineHealth, Bowdoin College, and L.L.Bean all competing for a similar pool of workers that are living in a similar area that is already constricted by the ocean. And that's really challenging. We have been really having more regional conversations, which has been great.
That's awesome. I really think, I grew up with my dad driving to Bath every day to work at Bath Iron Works. He still works there now. I think he has a calendar on his desk with the days left that he has to work. But, that's a long commute from Augusta to Bath, 45 minutes because of employment. But he did it because we're here. His family was here, all these kinds of things. But for people whom are coming to Maine to take a job that don't have some kind of familial tie or other reason to be in another community, they're going to navigate closer to where the employment base is. And BIW, and now with additional funding, seems to have even more legs to continue forward with producing, defense ships to protect us. And these people are going to continue to come to work here. How do we, I'm curious how we actually get the housing to the level that people can afford to pay. Based on the wages that a place like BIW is offering as an example, because you mentioned already, yes, it was a blue-collar community. It was known as low income because largely a result of what was being paid for wages by the employers in the area. And those wages haven't changed nearly at the level that the pricing of homes have changed. I mean, I think in Maine, the last I looked in the last decade, we were up about 40% in terms of wages, and home prices up about 187%. So other than somebody renting or having some kind of voucher to pay for rent, is there even a possibility for home ownership, and what does that look like for the average wage earner in your area?
Let me just back up a second.
Sure.
It has been really, really fabulous to have been evolving and growing our relationship with Bath Iron Works in really sitting together and thinking through the housing challenges. And again, back to wanting to make sure we have a range of housing options that does include talking to all of the employers in the area and saying, what's going on for you? What are your challenges? BIW had a real wake-up call when they had a push to hire 1,000 people, and they did. And I don't know about you all, but I had people from all over the country saying, "Hey, I just heard an ad in California. I heard an ad for recruiting for BIW," and I heard that from friends all over the country. They brought 1,000 people in, and they lost 1,000 people. There was nowhere for people to live, and they learned from that, and they have been very active in the conversation about housing need. One of the things, two things, really. One is a building we just opened. It was a rural housing project, a rental funded by Maine Housing under the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program. We just leased up that building, and a quarter of the new residents are new, entry-level, young shipbuilders. And it's awesome. And a couple of them are roommates. Some of them came out of the Job Corps program up in the county. So that's been really fun. And then second, we worked with BIW, and we just sold them a parcel of land that Bath Housing owned, and they are building 84 units of housing for shipbuilders.
Oh, great. They'll be owned by them?
They're working in partnership with another developer. And you should definitely invite them onto the podcast to talk about that project.
Definitely.
It's a really good one. It's a great example of employer-assisted housing, essentially, sort of like what Jackson Labs did.
Sure. Sort of like what the Mills did in Rumford 100 years ago. It's not necessarily a new phenomenon. It's just that we walked away from it because there wasn't the pressure to do it. Now there's the pressure to do it again. One of my first projects at Genesis Fund back in 2000 was looking at employer-assisted housing down on the Boothbay Peninsula. And 25 years later, they're building housing in Boothbay. Yeah, if you're going to give your employees benefits, that's cool, but not if they don't have a place to live.
Right.
So maybe that needs to be one of the benefits.
Yeah. So that's going to be a really great project to watch. Back to your question, which was around home ownership, that is a whole nother nut to crack. Yeah. And we're not there yet. I haven't seen models that are working. Bath Housing, we have a conceptual model that we're really excited about to do some small lot development to help people that either want to get into homeownership or they want to downsize to something more appropriate. That's one of the big areas that we're watching is anecdotally, again, I don't have the data to back it up, but I get a lot of calls from people that say, I very, very much want to stay in Bath. This is my community. This is my home. This is where everything is, but my house is more than I need. I'm not ready to rent. I would like to own something, but there's nothing on the market that works for me. And so I think we'll be spending some time really thinking and digging into models that may work for that.
I'm wondering, I know there's a program going on in Lewiston where they're taking these older triple deckers and they're making them into condos, and then persons are buying these buildings as like each level of that building is a condo. I know this has obviously happened a lot in Portland. But I'm wondering if the approach needs to be like a condo approach with almost what would look like to a bystander driving by a multifamily building, but it's actually a condo building, but it's only like a 4-unit condo. There's only 4 condos in the association,
Yeah. I mean, again, I think we're ready for some new models. And
is that allowed in Bath, something like that? That's another thing too. I mean, our previous episode was talking about zoning and
well, I mean, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the sort of the things that we've done at Bath Housing is really evolved our partnership and conversations with the city of Bath. It's been, again, another really rewarding relationship, really from the get-go, from the day I walked in to Bath Housing. And one of the things through the housing studies, through the work that we've done in the first, say 5 or 6 years, one of the things that became very obvious was the city's zoning was outdated for the needs that we saw, and that pretty much any project that was coming through the city was going through a contract zone process. And I'm the chair of the housing committee for the city of Bath, and we kind of said, is it possible that the city would be at a point of relooking at its zoning ordinance? And we were able to get funding from Maine State Housing Authority through their Community Solutions Grant to start that process. And I just learned this week that we are very close to rolling out the new zoning code.
Oh, that's great.
And it's been a really amazing, thorough process with a lot of great community input. And so, yeah, I think that Bath might be ready. I think, once that rolls out and we can really dig into it and understand, I think there's a lot of possibilities that really wouldn't have been there before this. Bath is doing this work at the same time LD 2003 came out, at the same time a couple other state laws came out. And so really, as a community, we're kind of like almost a step or a half step ahead of some communities. And so it's fun to be able to be a model for other communities as well.
I'm wondering if you see a world in which, there is, I can't name a street in Bath. I don't know them off the top of my head like I do other parts of the state. But if you're driving down a residential street that are all 1950s, 60s Cape homes, let's say, if one exists, maybe it doesn't in Bath, but that the 4th lot down on the right all of a sudden becomes a 3-story tall condo building with 3 units on that one single-family lot instead of just one. This is where there seems to me to be a rub between what's allowed and what people aesthetically want to see in a neighborhood versus what's economically viable. And I'm curious if in your work in the zoning and so forth, something like that was broached, because I feel like oftentimes that's the elephant in the room. Like, hey, we don't want to change the fabric of the way this looks here, but in order to be economically viable, it has to change.
What's interesting about Bath, and the street I live on is the perfect example, and I've used it for years, is I can't think of a street in Bath that has a homogeneous housing stock.
Okay.
Not one.
Yeah, so
Not
maybe it
one
makes it a
single
little
street
bit easier.
in the whole town is.
It's more eclectic.
It's so eclectic. You've got houses behind houses. You've got a lot of shared driveway situations. You've got single family duplex, triplex, fourplex, trailers, and captain's homes on the same street, and every single street. So I think. I don't want to say it won't be an issue. It may be an issue. There have been a couple of really interesting small lot redevelopments where a dilapidated house was torn down, something else was built there. and there are a couple of new homes in our community, and it's always interesting to hear different people talk about like how much they either absolutely love that one of the houses or absolutely don't love one of the houses. But I think that we do have going for us the fact that it's a pretty eclectic housing stock anyway.
It was interesting to see recently a statistic in which they looked at this country and looked for homes that were new construction for ownership that were under 300,000. And Maine, I think, had like 10. There were some states that had over 1,000. Of course, larger states, bigger geographic area, less restrictions, maybe easier to do. But all of New England was 0. And, I think perhaps the 10 that were in Maine were maybe some rural areas. I don't know for sure. But these were site-built homes too, not considering like modular manufactured homes. And it really was eye-opening to me because it's like we have this issue, not just here, but everywhere, really as a function of like what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Also the labor force, what people can produce things for. But to me, I really think we're going to have to get into being more comfortable around like more density, more units on the same lot, people cohabitating in a same like building structure, even if it's an ownership like a condo. Or we're going to have to use existing housing inventory, and just forget about new construction to add the units. And the way in which you do that is like take the old captain's home, which may be on the zoning only allowed for now a duplex under LD 2003, and say you can have 4 units in that or 8 units in that or whatever. Again, not a novel thing. It's been done forever, but largely in time has been made illegal to do. And these old captain's homes are huge. They're way more home than anybody needs unless they're just trying to make a flex or something, probably, like, can this be converted? And also, is Bath doing that or looking at doing that? Because to me, for Maine, where we have a labor shortage, an aging demographic, challenges with zoning and land use anyway, the lowest hanging fruit isn't to try to strive to solve this 80,000 house crisis by building all new houses. Right. It's maybe putting 4 units in one, so now you have 3 more toward the 80,000.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you brought this up. I mentioned before that it took us a while at Bath Housing to get into development, and that's because I'd been doing development for 10 years. I was ready for a break. But also I was really curious to see if there were other programmatic approaches we could take to make a dent in the housing challenges that we were seeing in Bath. And we had really good success with that. But ultimately, through some of the work that we did with Jeff Levine on our second strategic housing study and planning and visioning document, we came up with what we call the framework for action. And it really recognizes that we're not going to build our way out of this, that you have to have, or it's smart to have a 4-pronged strategy. And this works for the work that we do. It works for smaller communities. It works for state conversations. And that's why I really love it. But the 4-pronged strategy is development. I mean, we do need new units. Preservation is we need to make sure that we're not building new units while we're losing existing units that have been at good price points, or there's the whole rural development stock that's been a big conversation out there, trailer parks, et cetera. So making sure we're also putting time and attention and energy into preservation. Third is we need to make sure that our direct services programs that support people to stay in their homes, or property tax relief, or whatever those direct services programs are around housing, that we're not losing sight of those as we're doing these other things. And the fourth is the sort of public policy advocacy, the land use. I mean, that's where the land use conversation has come. So what's great is when you pull all these together, I think it's given us a much better foundation for sort of a comprehensive baby step solution to the housing challenges. And it's not just the one project that we just built that's going to change things in our area. It's our project combined with Comfortably Home, which is our aging in place program, combined with the city's new energy match program for efficiency Maine rebates to help low-income people make home improvements to reduce their energy costs, combined with the state's new roof replacement program, combined with the zoning changes that allow somebody that's got a 12,000 square foot lot to subdivide it, sell a portion and get somebody to build a new house, combined with our new short-term rental policy, combined with our new accessory dwelling unit policy. All of these things that we've been doing, maybe each one makes a small change, but you put them all together and we are seeing really positive changes.
It sounds like a
in our
capital
area.
stack to build a skyscraper in downtown Boston, but it's almost what's needed.
It is, and it's I'd love to say it was all like precisely strategic. I think in the sense that it's all built on really good relationship work, on creativity, on innovation, and again, on just relationships. You have a city that's willing to engage. You've got a housing authority that's willing to be creative. You've got community members that get that this is an issue and they're supportive of the work we're doing. So
I wonder what you would say to a community that's not really kind of leading as much as you are in Bath, because while this is wonderful, the work that you're doing in Bath, if it's not replicated elsewhere, either A, everybody's going to go live in Bath, which is going to exacerbate your problem, or B, like we're just going to stagnate, right? And I wonder how, I guess, how do we, I mean, part of the reason why we do this podcast is to build awareness and to get the word out there and to really try to inspire other people or communities to take on some of these better practices, right? What's a good way to get started if like a community is not really doing anything actively? Should they first try to stand up and have a thriving housing authority, or is a different approach maybe better?
There's no reason for a community to start a new housing authority.
Okay.
That was legislation from 1969. That's there's no value. That's a whole other conversation. But I feel pretty strongly that every community has a role in talking and thinking about housing and housing challenges, and again, ensuring that there's housing stability for their community members and people that maybe want to be community members. It doesn't have to be quite so profound as some of the things that we've talked about. We're working with communities in our surrounding area, more coastal communities that maybe have more tourism, and talking through what are their challenges, what are their priorities, and maybe the best first step is to look at your short-term rental policy. And the work that we did in Bath, we've actually just we've drafted a white paper to share around communities, because the process of the work we did was probably as valuable as the product, and to be able to share that with other communities to say, we can help you put together a thoughtful approach to looking at short-term rentals.
What is the policy in Bath?
We just launched it on January 1st, and there's now a registration. It involves registering short-term rental units, and there's a cap.
So in Bath now there is a registry requirement for short-term rentals. So it's not saying you can't have one,
Right.
unless you were to reach the cap in Bath, and then people couldn't have them anymore moving forward. Is this like a problem there? Are there a lot of short-term rentals?
One of the things that we learned is that it wasn't a problem, that we didn't really have a big problem with short-term rentals, but the idea around the policy was to be proactive so that we didn't get to a point where we did have a problem. As we dug into the process of learning about them and seeing what we had and talking to the community and talking to the short-term rental operators, what we learned is that most of the short-term rentals in the community are what we started calling additive units, that somebody had extra space in their apartment and they were renting out a room. We wanted to encourage those. Those don't even count in the cap.
Oh, good.
And it was units that somebody was taking offline and turning into short-term rentals. That was more what we wanted to be counting and monitoring.
Yeah, because some communities it's quite high, like in the Bar Harbor region or Booth Bay. But this is a great topic to be discussing for people that are listening outside of Maine, because this is, it's not just a Maine issue; it's everywhere. And there's two sides of it. I understand it from kind of a private market capitalism approach, but I also understand it from the fact that, there's 25-year-old kids graduating from college and they've got their first job and they're blocked out,
I definitely recommend talking to Misty Parker at the City of Bath about the process that we used, because it was really, we had a lot of work to build trust with the operators to say, we're not trying to shut you down, we want to support you. And it was a great relationship building process. And the biggest piece, I think, and the reason our process was so successful is that we were clear in what we were trying to accomplish before we started picking out policy tools and levers. And so we had done a lot of work with City Council, with the Planning Board, with the community, with the operators to sort of lay out our goals, and then picked the policy levels that would help us meet those goals. So interesting.
Yeah, I think in Maine, I don't know the exact number. I'm okay with being a little bit wrong on the number because it happens to me all the time, which I think is somewhere on the order of like 20 to 30%, maybe more of the housing stock in the state is second homes, right? And so we actually have a lot of structures that would solve the problem. And this was raised during my time in the legislature a lot, and I frankly have some mixed feelings about it, because I understand that it would be the easiest way to solve the problem to just take all the ones that are offline and bring them online and make them available to people. Like, that would be a much faster approach than building new, right? Or even renovating properties from 1 to 3 or 4 units. But, at the same time, there are people for whom they made their investment decision in buying that real estate based on that. And then there are people who didn't. Like, they've always just had a second home, and maybe it was left to them by their parents, whom it was left to them by their parents. And you have this is really, really starting to come to roost now, this differentiation among people who were in families that had been able to leave them something, and it was in Maine, and they're not in Maine anymore. They went somewhere else, but they want to keep it for nostalgia or whatever. And then the people that didn't have that, and they can't buy that person's house because, that's the way it works, and they're just sitting there. It seems like it's really even more pronounced here, just because we're more vacation land for so many people for whom maybe it was their father or their grandfather or grandmother who lived here, and they couldn't find a job, so they went to Delaware, but they still aren't going to get rid of that place up in Maine because they want to go there a few times a year. And I think that happens probably to some degree in Bath. It's more pronounced in areas where there's waterfront property or some kind of destination or in the ocean. But this is really quite an issue, and I haven't really kind of figured out what would be the right amount of pressure to put on it, because you can't go to people and be like, you have to sell your place.
People have rights with their property.
Right,
but the LURC, the Land Use Regulation Commission, has done some really interesting work around this, and I believe they started with sort of what I would call a baby step policy, which is, let's just get people registered just so we know who's got what. They're going to be watching and slowly evolving. I'm not an expert in what they're doing, but I think that was a good one to watch too. And that's for a lot of those, in the northern part of the state, and a lot of those where a lot of cottages and cabins and camps and second homes are. So I think watching that process will be interesting. And to some extent, it's really there's a value to knowing what we have and really understanding what we have before we make crazy decisions.
Yeah, that's true. There's now a work being done to track the number of new units that are being added, because it was like, well, we know that this is our goal. How do we know if we're tracking toward that or not, if we're not collecting data on what's been done?
Yeah.
And we have over 400 municipalities in the state, some with a lot of capacity and some with none. And they don't, if I walk into Midcoast Maine and want to build a house, I probably don't really just need to get a building. I just get a building permit, or maybe they don't even require one. I don't know what they require locally. And that's it. Like, I just go build the home, and there's no reports anywhere or what it was that's there. And how do you know it's there without a report, Right. It seems to me really interesting that Bath as a community that once was really viewed as being low income, blue collar, has now been able to progress more into this kind of really more mixed environment, which is healthy because you have people maybe who are able to support the local economy, the businesses and so forth, frequenting them and going there. But it's, in my opinion, it's kind of unique in a lot of ways. Many communities are more homogenous. There's not as much of a mix, and perhaps yes, home prices went up in Bath, but maybe that offers an opportunity to stabilize the local economy a little bit better with folks who are there, maybe more affluent.
I think one of the things, ask people's favorite conversation in Bath is, how did you come to be here? And you get great stories. But, almost every person that I talk to that found Bath, kind of like we did, they love that the fact that we're not a homogenous community, and that's really an appeal. So I think the question and the challenge for our community is, how do we maintain that going forward? And, sure, we've grown incomes, and sure, there's, there's a lot of good aspects of that, but the biggest challenge right now is to kind of quell the displacement. And so it's not great if you can't afford to maintain your own house in Bath anymore, or if you have to sell and go farther away. And so there's some positive aspects to the housing stock improving, and to less vacancies, or less sort of dilapidated homes that have been, people are buying them and fixing them up. And, but again, we want to make sure that we're making sure people have an opportunity to stay, and they're not losing the opportunity to live there.
Well, that's a good segue into, I think, comfortably home, and also like what you mentioned in your comment earlier about the state now having a roof replacement program. I'm, of course, a recovering politician now, so I'm not up to speed on all the new stuff that's been done in the current legislature. What is that program, and what's kind of the vision or goals around helping people with aging in place or staying at home?
Yeah. So I will defer the roof replacement program information. I'll get you the contact for that.
Oh, great.
That program. I believe it's being piloted right now.
Oh, okay.
And they're in the early phases of identifying contractors and inspectors that could work on that program.
But this would be like some kind of subsidy to help someone replace their roof?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Comfortably Home, I'm more than happy to talk about.
Great, yeah.
This is a program that Bath Housing started in 2015 with a really simple goal to help people thrive in their own home as they age. We were seeing a number of things that sort of led us to this program, which I'll go back to. But we've now, as of our 10th anniversary recently, we've been in more than 400 homes. And we have hard data on the benefits of the program, which is reduced falls, reduced hospitalizations, reduced 911 calls and EMS calls, and just far better quality of life. It's an extremely simple program where our maintenance techs go into a home, they walk around, they help understand how somebody is using their home, how they're not using it, what areas they're avoiding, and then they put together a simple work plan that could involve a second banister on a stairway. It could involve changing out the levers on your faucets to make them easier to turn on and off. We do a lot of grab bars. We do stair repairs, really helping people get in and out of their homes safely. And it's at an unbelievably low cost. So it's free to participants. And we are funded through Maine Housing, and the per home cost is less than $3,000.
Where does that funding come from? The federal government?
It's state home funds.
It is?
Yeah.
And for those listening that are not familiar, the state of Maine has a transfer tax. So every home that is sold up to $1 million, each side pays $2.20 per thousand, and then that goes into this pool of funding called the Home Fund. And then the amount above $1 million is more than that now. And those generate somewhere on the order, I think, around $25 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
This program that we started in 2015 has, thanks to Maine Housing, is now replicated to almost the entire state is covered. through their with programs like ours.
Okay.
This through Maine Housing calls it their community aging in place funding, and so there are housing authorities, there are community action agencies, there are habitat affiliates all around the state that are doing the same work modeled after our program. And then the other kind of really cool thing is that the federal government actually used our program as a model to create the HUD's Older Adult Home Modification Program.
Wow, congrats. I didn't know that.
Yeah, has been funding programs all across the country to do very, very similar work.
Well, I would imagine in a state that not only has the oldest housing inventory, but also the oldest population, there's huge demand for something like this. It must always get fully subscribed.
Definitely, and right now the challenge is there's a dip in the state home fund, and so Maine Housing has far less money this year to support us, and they were 3 times oversubscribed in applications, and we're waiting to hear our funding for this year. So, we're hopeful that through the upcoming bond process or as the state home program kind of replenishes that we know Maine Housing has a commitment to it, and again we have really phenomenal data that we've gathered from all the programs for the last 7 years that Maine Housing's been funding it.
So if somebody knows someone that is wanting to stay in their home but needs to have some of these modifications, grab bar, better faucet, accessible, different things, what should they do?
Mm-hmm. Probably the best place to start is on Maine Housing's website under their Community Aging in Place program, and then it lists all of the programs in the state. So then depending where you live, you'll find the contact information for the program close to you. There are a couple of parameters. You have to be below 100% of median income. Mm-hmm. The household does. It is for people that own their home or a family member trust owns the home. It's not a rental. It's not a program for renters. And you have to either age qualify at 55 years of age or younger, or older, or have a disability. So those are the consistent criteria across.
Interesting.
The state. But nobody pays a dime.
And I would imagine why it's not for renters is because it would then be the landlord that would be benefiting from the improvement to the property in time.
It's just a lot more complexity, but in general, at least for renters that live at Bath Housing, if they need something like that, they call and put a work order in and we'll do it.
Right.
For the most part, the landlord needs to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So stable housing promotes health, education, and financial stability, something that you at Bath Housing prioritize across programs. How do you connect housing with broader community wellness and an opportunity in your work?
Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about this because it's really at the core of what we do.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of the other stuff that we do, but really we are a property management company, and we have a set of residents and a phenomenal team at Bath Housing that ensures that these people are having great housing experiences. One of the phrases that I've heard a lot is housing is a vaccine. Stable housing is sort of the first step in being able to be a well and successful member of your community, whether it's going to school, whether it's holding down your job, being a great parent. I feel like we say this all the time, but it's probably always worth repeating. We really pride ourselves in paying attention to our residents, learning about what their needs are, understanding their changing needs, and not just our residents, but the people that come in and look for housing. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, I need housing, we sit down and talk to them. We have a basic survey that we do to understand what's going on in their life, what's created the housing instability, and then we track these patterns over time. And with sort of that solid understanding of the needs, then we work with a long list of partners in the community. Our healthcare agency in the area, tons of nonprofits. We work with the Sagadahoc chapter of MAFCA on community gardens. We evolved from connecting residents to food pantries in the region to converting to on-site food pantries because you had a concentrated group of people that needed the services, and they were all trying to find transportation to get to the food pantry, and it wasn't working very well. So now we bring the food pantries to them. We do on-site vaccine clinics, tax prep, and during the pandemic, we learned that a lot of people didn't understand how to use their phones or their tablets, and so they couldn't communicate with their doctor's offices or their kids or their grandkids. And now we have IT volunteers that come in and help people with their technology needs.
Wow, that's great.
The city of Bath has a bus service, which is fabulous, but it only runs during the day. And, so for a brief time, we actually had a taxi voucher program to help people get transportation that unfortunately went away, but we still provide free bus passes for our residents. So we track what the needs are. We evolve our relationships to support people to make sure that they have everything that they need to be successful. And we have a resident services team that works. They both do individual needs assessments and group needs assessments, again, to say, like, what are we seeing? Out of these conversations, we just recently did a series on end-of-life planning. So that's been a really, really great model. The people that live in our housing, I feel like, are really, they're not the people I worry about. It's the people that are coming to us saying, I don't have stable housing, I have all these challenges. That's the people I worry about. And how do we, kind of evolve our housing programs to meet those needs.
Are there programs to help people who maybe don't own a home learn about home ownership, or also people maybe who own homes, not necessarily in the category of needing the repairs done, but more so like, just, hey, I bought a home, but I'm not really sure. I'm not asking you to pay to fix it, but I'm not really sure what to do to take care of it.
Bath has the Bath has a sustainability committee that has done some really good work, and they actually set up technical assistance workshops for homeowners in the region to come in and say, here's what I need, and can you help me navigate it? So that's been a really good local option. And then I think there are some homeownership centers in the state that do more of that other kind of work. The last piece I was just going to say about sort of working with residents and connecting them to services is, we make a great point of getting regular input from our residents, and we have regular coffee hours and office hours and resident advisory boards and residents sitting on our board, so that we always have our finger on the pulse of those changing needs and patterns, so that we can evolve the work and the services and the partnerships to best meet their needs so that they can really thrive.
Yeah, because it sounds like there is a lot, obviously a lot of the work is focused on, like you said, we're a property management company and focusing on the rental side of things, but it seems like, to me, there's also work being done as much as possible to advance on the ownership front too, because I think obviously we're always going to have people who are renting. However, there are people for whom, if we only focus on the rental creation side of things, we'll never actually have access to ownership or building equity, because we kind of focused a lot of our efforts, or majority of our efforts, on the rental side of things, which, is easier to scale because, you can put 50 or 100 units in one building and you're like, okay, there's 50 to 100 units, but like, did somebody get a chance to own part of the American dream, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, my experience, I haven't had a lot of experience on the ownership side of things, but Comfortably Home really was our mechanism. As we were talking to people who had moved into our buildings, we were talking to people that were coming to say, I need help, talking to like doctors in the community, and they're saying, we have people that come in here and we send them for a home assessment, but they come back and I say, did you get the assessment? And they say, yeah, they told us all these things I need to do to live safely in my home, but I don't know who to call. I can't afford it. So the work doesn't get done. And so these were all kind of seeds of why we started Comfortably Home. But, sometimes it might be somebody comes to us and they say, I need some help to, with basic improvements in my home. But sometimes it's somebody comes in and says, I want to move into an apartment. And we say, okay, well, we have a 2-year waiting list. And they say, what do I do for 2 years? And we can say, here, we could send Comfortably Home in, because maybe there are ways that we can make it, better for you in those 2 years while you're waiting. The reality is most people don't want to move out of their home that they've owned forever and lived and love. But their homes don't work for them anymore. And so you've got like a person with deferred maintenance and a home with deferred maintenance, and it doesn't work very well. And so if we can do some work on the house to keep that a place that somebody can live longer, that means we free up that unit for somebody that really does need a unit to move into. And that's, again, first and foremost, people want to stay in their own home. You know, they don't want to move into our apartments, and that's fine. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's help them do that. And so, you know, again, that's the biggest.
Well, and the least expensive home to create is the one that's already been created.
Exactly. And the work that we do, the cost of making some basic changes to a home to make somebody live there very much more easily, I mean, is a fraction of what it costs to build a new unit. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we'll be
Less
talking
than a fraction.
about. I mean, you're looking at $3,000 versus $340,000.
Yeah. It's
So
huge.
you can fund all of the programs across the state for what it would cost to, you know, build 3 new housing units in the state. So again, it's not one or the other, it's both.
Right.
And that's, you know, kind of my message all the time is like, we need to be focusing on these very different areas, and they will complement each other, and they will help us get to where we want to be.
I love that. So as we wrap things up, I want to say thank you very much for being here. And also, if there are any ways in which people might get more engaged, how they would do that. But before you answer that, what's your vision for, you know, the future in the Bath region and maybe beyond? Key priorities and opportunities that you have for addressing the needs more broadly.
We, as I shared at the beginning, we're just getting our data on sort of the updated data, and we will be launching on a new strategic plan. I think one of the things that's likely to happen is we will just continue a little bit to do more of the same, which is to focus on our relationships and our partnerships. We want to grow housing opportunities in Bath. We don't necessarily need to grow Bath housing to make that happen. And so partnerships like with Developers Collaborative and the new shipyard housing, with the Zanton Company in the Uptown, those are perfect opportunities that we can have partnerships that we collectively get more housing built. Grow the work that we've done to kind of share some of the best practices that we found and the solutions that have worked. I think that'll be a piece of this, to help other communities know that they do have a role, and it can be a small baby step, but that's still progress. Working with Midcoast Council of Governments is doing some really great work around housing now, and we're working with them. So I think, it's the building on those relationships. I think it's sharing our story, sharing the lessons learned. I think we're really excited to start looking at some new models now that we have the new zoning code. Maybe we can try some new models. Maybe we do get into some home ownership or equity building housing, whether that's condos, cooperatives, home ownership. Because we'll have a new zoning code, I think there's our development side of things about that. I think we're really excited about that. I think the final two things is that we have a real understanding that the two things that allow us to do what we do are our staff, and so to continue to make sure that we are taking care of our team in every sort of way, that they are the core of what we do, and we have a phenomenal staff. And the second is just continuing to be responsive and authentic community member, and share the story and share the conversation in our community, so that when we propose a project, that people trust us and people say, we might not like everything about that project, but we know that they really vetted it, and we know they listened to us, and they, and we trust that they're going to manage it well.
That's great.
So,
and if folks want to get more engaged in learning about what it is that you're doing, are the programs and different things that you talked about available, like on your website?
Yeah, we have a website. People can always call me.
Sure.
The one of the things I've really noticed around sort of public discourse lately is people are often quick to say, I don't like something, and what I really would love to see is more people stand up in support of things. And so
More YIMBYs.
following what's going on in your community. You don't have to go to a city council meeting, but just sending a note to your city councilor saying like, "Hey, I think that's a really great idea." Is I think if we spend more time saying like, "Nice job, good work. Here's some constructive feedback," as opposed to yuck or no at every turn, I think we're all just going to be a lot happier.
I love it. That's great. It's so true. Get out there and be positive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Deb, for coming up to Augusta today and sharing the story that you have had with Bath Housing and beyond. It's really, I think, quite inspiring to hear about programs that you've created that have gone nationally and other great work that you've done to actually help solve this crisis and really like be part of the solution. So thank you for all that you're doing, and kudos to you and the team for all your great work.
Great. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sure.